Well, it's a pleasure to have Senator Ted Cruz on the program. Ted, I must confess, I'm a little exhausted tonight trying to yet again explain the Constitution to the left. It's just they're going to pass a statute making the District of Columbia a state. Are they not aware that the Constitution has to be amended? Am I missing something?
Well, their reason for doing it is pretty transparent. They want 2 new Democratic senators. And I will say, if you actually look at the draft they put together, that it was pretty clever how they did it. So you and I both know the Constitution requires that there be a seat of government, a district that's not a state. The way they've drafted it, there's still a D.C. They just carve out this tiny, tiny, tiny little D.C. that includes the Capitol, the White House, and the Mall. And all of the rest of it becomes a new state. And so if they were to try to do it, there would surely be litigation over it. There'd be a real challenge. It was contrary to the Constitution. But I will give them a nod for clever lawyering in that they're at least trying to write their way around the constitutional prohibition.
Geez, so the federal government is just a tiny little speck as opposed to its ubiquitous control over so much of our lives. All right, I got it. Ted Cruz, I want to talk to you about communist China. You know, while we're dithering with chasing down an ex-president, well, should we have a trial or should we censure him or what should we do? And while we have a current president who thinks he's a monarch signing one law after another, I think he's almost up to 40, sweeping changes, quote the media, to God knows everything. China is on the move and China is dangerous. I mean, they've basically gobbling up Hong Kong. They want to gobble up Taiwan. They're taking over the South China Sea. They're on the move while the Democrats are chasing, Trump. What else is China up to these days?
Well, Mark, you're exactly right that China is resurgent. I have long believed that communist China poses the single greatest geopolitical threat to the United States over the next century. And one of the things we've seen playing out in the past week has been a really disturbing pattern among the Biden cabinet nominees, one after the other, keeps embracing and snuggling up to and apologizing for communist China. So, for example, Biden's nominee for Commerce Secretary, I asked her at her confirmation hearing if she would commit to maintaining and keeping Huawei on the prohibited entities list. Now, Huawei, as you know, is the massive espionage company that masquerades as a telecom company, and it's what communist China uses to try to spy on people all around the world. She was unwilling to make that commitment. And so one of the early things the Biden administration seems to be flirting with is lifting all the sanctions on China and enabling them to engage in more surveillance. Just today, we had a confirmation hearing for Biden's nominee to be ambassador to the United Nations. A little over a year ago, in October of 2019, she gave a paid speech to a Confucius Institute here in the United States. Now, Confucius Institutes, as you know, are controlled, are paid for by communist China, by the Chinese government. They operate as hubs of espionage and propaganda on U.S. universities. And I authored bipartisan legislation that was passed into law a couple of years ago to crack down on Confucius Institutes, and it's resulted in dozens of Confucius Institutes being closed. Well, Biden's UN ambassador spoke at a Confucius Institute, was paid for doing so, and gave this speech just praising China and saying America needs to follow the example of communist China. This is a very disturbing pattern across the nominees of warmly embracing the communist Chinese government.
And he has a lot of appointees or would-be appointees throughout the State Department national security structure that are soft on China. Does he not?
He does. And listen, Joe Biden has a long history of apologizing for China himself. I mean, you'll recall the video of him saying a few years back, come on, man. They're not our enemies. They're our friends. Well, unfortunately, either he personally or everyone surrounding him, everyone he seems to be appointing into positions of authority, is already stepping into the role of being an apologist for the Chinese communists. You know, Joe Biden just signed an executive order ordering the federal government not to refer to COVID-19 as the China virus, or I guess the Wuhan virus, because acknowledging where it came from, apparently, is no longer allowed. And as you and I both know, it isn't just that this pandemic originated in Wuhan, China, but the Chinese Communist government suppressed information about it, imprisoned doctors, disappeared doctors, silenced and stopped efforts to contain it initially. Had they acted responsibly, this might have been contained as a regional outbreak, but they made willing decisions to silence and stop efforts to prevent the spread of it, and the results have been hundreds of thousands of deaths across the globe. And the Biden administration, it seems, has zero interest in holding China accountable for its misconduct.
Have they not also allowed China, by reversing President Trump's executive order, to sell material and technology related to our electrical grid?
Absolutely, yes. Look, what is striking is the breadth of it, that every policy being implemented insofar as it concerns China is lessening the scrutiny, lessening the sanctions, lessening the pressure, and is embracing communist China. And we're just a week into this. I mean, if they're talking about lifting the restrictions on Huawei 1 week into it, where do you think this is 6 months from now or a year from now? I mean, this is, and one of the reasons for this, the big funders of the Democratic Party, big tech, Hollywood, Wall Street, they're all in bed with China. They all make money from China. And so big tech has deep interest in promoting the Chinese Communist government, and the Democratic Party is dancing to that very same tune. It is really dangerous in terms of protecting the national security interest of the United States. And you rightly noted, Hong Kong and Taiwan, I think, are both in communist China's crosshairs, and we're not seeing any indications from the Biden administration that they would be willing to stand up against Chinese aggression.
I am very, very fearful of what's taking place inside our country. I'm very fearful of the threats outside our country. And I really think this is a point at which America could slip to number 2 in superpower, because we're hollowing ourselves out, attacking our energy system, attacking the men and women who work in that system, opening our borders wide, making it very difficult for American citizens to keep or get jobs, unskilled, low-skilled, middle-class Americans. I just think we're doing so many of the wrong things. And internationally, when you look at how they're already appeasing the regime in Iran, China sees that, and then you see they're appeasing the Palestinian aggressive Palestinians or terrorist Palestinians, whether it's Hamas or whether it's Abbas. You can see that this administration, is this the third term of Obama but worse?
Yes. And you know what is strange about Democratic foreign policy is the Democrat Party, they have a list of almost good countries and bad countries, and they've got it exactly reversed. So it is Democratic orthodoxy that communist China is a good country and we should be friends with them. It is Democratic orthodoxy that Iran is somehow a good country, even though it's the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, and we should be friends with them. And so we're seeing policies, the early Biden administration, their top foreign policy objective is to send hundreds of billions of dollars to the Ayatollah Khamenei, who chants death to America and death to Israel. And in the bad country category, the number one, unfortunately, is Israel. And we saw the Obama-Biden administration that orchestrated the shameful UN resolution 2334 in the final months of the Obama-Biden presidency. Well, those same radicals are being put forward. President Biden has nominated as the Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman, who is the architect who negotiated the catastrophic Iran nuclear deal. And this is the extremes that unfortunately right now are driving the agenda in this administration. It is very, very dangerous for our country.
Now, Ted Cruz, you're under attack, as are other Republicans in Congress, for simply raising a question, looking at 1876, thinking of a commission. You have colleagues who are trying to damage you. What is that like?
Yeah. Well, I think the Democrats right now and the media right now, they are drunk with power. They've won the presidency. They have majorities in both houses. And the moment they're at it reminds me of the end of every one of the Godfather movies. If you remember all three of the movies at the end, Michael Corleone seeks to settle his debts, and he wants to eliminate all of his enemies. That's where the Democrats are right now. They're trying to eliminate all of their enemies. So they're trying to destroy President Trump because they hate Donald J. Trump. They're trying to destroy me. They're trying to destroy conservatives. They're targeting all of us. Big tech is trying to silence conservative voices, and they're trying to destroy the 75 million Americans who voted for President Trump, to tar every one of us as racist, bigoted, ignorant rubes who should be erased and canceled from our culture. You know, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, just last week, she put out this video saying, "I demand that Ted Cruz resign from the Senate." Mm-hmm. I got to admit, Mark, I actually laughed. I said, "You demand, really? That? How exactly does that work? Did you just stomp your foot and demand it? Well, I demand you bring me vanilla ice cream."
Yeah.
You know, I'm sorry. I ain't going anywhere. I'm committed to the fight. I'm going to be in the Senate. I'm going to be leading the fight against these disastrous, dangerous policies. I'm going to be defending our freedoms. And we're going to go through a tough couple of years of some extreme radical policies being pushed by the Democrats. But I believe 2022 is going to be a much better election, and 2024 is going to be a much better election because the leftists, they're going to overreach. They're already doing it. They're going to go too far, and politics is like a pendulum. We're going to come back towards common sense. We just got to make it through these 2 years, and I know you're going to lead the fight, and I'm going to be leading the fight right alongside you.
Well, it's an honor to know you, Ted. It's an honor to know you before you're a senator, during the time you're a senator. You're a very principled man, and the Levin audience backs you. So keep at it, and we will continue to support you. Take care of yourself.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you for speaking out for the Constitution and for liberty. Both are imperiled today like never before, and thank you to the millions of patriots who listen to you and stand together. I appreciate the support.
Well, thank you, my friend, and be well. Be safe. Take care of yourself.
Take care. God bless.
He's a great guy. He's such a patriot, Ted Cruz, really, such a patriot.